Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hi Confidants, I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. Last year in 2017, I was fortunate enough to be invited to the Human Dignity Festival in Hong Kong. This was the first Human Dignity Festival ever, and it was created by Bess Hepworth, who is the founder of LGBTI NGO Planet Ally. She created the Human Dignity Festival and invited leaders in the human rights field from all over the world. It was an amazing experience and I met some fantastic people. I've already put up interviews on Hong Kong Confidential with Mikhail Tomasov, episode 22, From Russia with Love, and episode 14, Stop Human Trafficking with Matt Friedman, and episode 13, The Accidental Activist with Kamoga. Please check out their interviews, they're awesome. Bess Hepworth is the founder of the LGBTI NGO Planet Ally. Bess Hepworth was named the top 10 people to follow on Twitter for biz and inclusion. She was in the top 10 in the RAHM Global LGBTI Leadership Contest. She's also a leader in the UNDP, being LGBTI in Asia, which is a regional program aimed at addressing inequality, violence and discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity or intersex status. She's also the APAC Transgender Network Advisor. Bess is a dedicated activist for human rights. She is an amazing woman, and I got to chat to Bess about the Human Dignity Festival, and here's that interview. Today I'm here with Bess Hepworth, the co-founder of the Human Dignity Festival, which is held in Hong Kong, and they had their inaugural event in 2017. Hi Bess, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, it's so great. A fellow South Australian in Hong Kong. I love it.
Actually, we've got to tell people we're neighbours. We were born 10 years apart, but about 20 minutes drive from each other in South Australia. Shout out to everyone in Riverton and Kapunda.
That's right.
So Bess, give me a little bit of background on the Human Dignity Festival.
Yeah, sure. So last year was also the first year that Planet Ally was born as an NGO. So we got a little bit excited, but I think a lot of what happened with Human Dignity Festival was out of my allyship journey that led me to create Planet Ally. And basically what I see is just because people are LGBTI doesn't mean that they're necessarily open to being aware of other human rights issues, and vice versa. Just because someone's in the human rights space doesn't necessarily mean that they are okay with LGBTI people. You can have homophobic asylum seekers. You can have transgender migrant workers. And so it's about bringing together all of these communities and realizing that we really need to support each other. The other thing that was very deliberate is we had global LGBTI leaders to bring in their thought leadership, but deliberately I wanted to make sure they left with something too. So it really opened their eyes to human trafficking, migrant worker issues, disability, you name it. really quickly done and passionately done, but we squeezed as much in as we could. And then the other piece is making sure that we didn't just have NGOs in the room. We had people from the private sector. We had people that are global citizens in Hong Kong looking for opportunities to be involved in community. And there's a lot of privilege to leverage of people that want to leave the world better than they found it and are well-intentioned, and to marry them up with NGO, human rights defenders that really need to find people to help champion them. They know how to lead, but they might not have the resources or the privilege to even open a door to a conversation about funding or about capacity building. What I say is more about my allyship journey led me to this.
Right.
And you've done Camoga, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I've done Camoga, I've done Mikhail.
So the listeners would have heard that, because Camoga is one of the reasons that this happened, because we ran the film fest downstairs, like at FLM, and there was a gay Ugandan asylum seeker that came. And it just blew my mind as to the fact that you could have, here you are as a well-meaning, activist trying to do something for outside and thinking about Africa and Uganda specifically, and right on your doorstep is somebody that's been affected, a gay Ugandan asylum seeker, right? So that was such a powerful moment for me to realize this, and it's Hong Kong, so it's very intersectional. It's, so many different cultures, come and go. And asylum seekers look to Hong Kong without knowing the realities of that process of applying for asylum. They look to Hong Kong as somewhere that you can, thinking that that would be a good choice for them. And unfortunately, the reality on the ground is it's a horrendous choice. But nobody knows that when they're just fleeing their country, and they have limited options. And Hong Kong is so well-travelled and somewhere that so many airlines travel to. So, yeah, that was a massive moment for me to realise the impact of what you do in one country isn't just about looking at it outside that country that you're in. It's about looking at who from the country is actually in yours. And so, yeah, that was massive.
Why do you think Hong Kong is a horrendous choice for asylum seekers to come to?
Well, unfortunately, if you look at the asylum seeker process, I don't have the statistics, but the Justice Centre, do a lot of work in this space. The approval rate for somebody that seeks asylum here is minuscule. And when you put LGBTI issues on top of that, that makes it just doubly as hard. The other issue that you have here is housing for asylum seekers and refugees is completely substandard. And you have closeted LGBTI folks applying for asylum, and they stay in the closet even in the homes that they're in because they may be placed with other families that are homophobic because of their cultural education, if you will, or because of the societal homophobia and transphobia that exists from the countries they came to. And so one of the catalysts for the Human Dignity Festival is looking at human rights issues and realising that just because someone's a human rights defender doesn't necessarily mean that they are comfortable with LGBTI people. So when Camoga was here, we had an amazing opportunity with PETA and Camoga and Shannon Power, who was the journalist from Gay Star News that came as well. She ran a panel at FLM Bar, and we invited a Ugandan asylum seeker who's now a refugee in Hong Kong, who's a wonderful woman. But she actually had a homophobic point of view. And some of her views were that people chose to be gay. And this all played out in this little panel that we had in the bar at FLM. As I've talked about before to people, spaces of grace. You need to find spaces of grace for people to shift and for hearts and minds to change. It's not about shaming people. It's about meeting them where they're at on their allyship journey, and maybe they're not allies at all, as was this case, but gently opening their eyes and educating them to the issues. So here was this woman from Kampala as a straight woman, with her issues for needing to leave. And then you have Camoga, a gay Ugandan, and they're both in Shangwan and having this very respectful, gentle conversation. That's what changes hearts and minds, not shaming people, not blaming people. It's understanding. And so human rights issues aren't necessarily queer-friendly. And I think that's one of my goals in the Human Dignity Festival, is to bring all these different intersections together and also realise that asylum seekers can be LGBTI, realize migrant workers can be trans. We have amazing visibility with Mars, who's one of our attendees at the Human Dignity Festival, who we raised some money for quite a few months earlier to help them with their refuge centre. It's opening our eyes to human rights issues are about us all. And it's really important to appreciate that you don't assume just because someone's in the human rights space, they necessarily are gay friendly.
So do you feel that you achieved some of this with the Human Dignity Festival this year? It was the very first inaugural one, wasn't it? And did you reach your goals, and what are you hoping for the next one?
That's a great question. I think thanks to a phenomenal volunteer team and thanks to Jules Hannaford sharing a lot of the content, which is just amazing that you could do that for us and for our community and the wider community listening to all the stories. Massively indebted to you for that. It's just wonderful. We ran that in a very short time frame on a zero budget, right? This is not best practice 101 for event management. This was a very passionate activist coming to a community and a group of volunteers and saying, let's do this. And so the fact that it even happened is due to Meta and my co-founder Haas and all of our amazing volunteers. And so what we do now is go, wow, that happened. We brought these amazing intersections of life together. We've got a global LGBTI posse who have stayed in touch and support each other. I mean, just this week, there's been crackdowns at an NGO in Kampala. The Human Rights Awareness Promotion Forum were cracked down, and with machetes, people were attacked. The guards are attacked, and as I'm talking to you, these guards are fighting for their life. Kamoga was able to reach out on our WhatsApp group. That WhatsApp group is connected to Mikhail, who's now translating what happened in Russian to make sure that's disseminated. All of the activists are a really fine-tuned little unit. But what we need to do now is bring the Hong Kong community together, Resolve Foundation, the Justice Centre, all these incredible groups, Unison. What we need to do now is regroup and say, what's the best use of this? This happened as a passionate whim. It happened with the Human Dignity Festival using the Human Tattoo event as an amazing way to catalyst, and that was how this was born, actually.
Through the tattoo event, which was really good at raising awareness, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I looked at that as an artistic opportunity to what I call serious play. Take something that's artistic and playful and powerful and marry it up with an opportunity to educate folks about our community. And so initially I wanted to bring Kamoga over and bring Sander and Nikki from the Human Rights Tattoo, and that was all that was meant to be, tied in a nice little bow, little event. But the more that we started talking to other activists, and in the time of planning that, Chechen happened. And so we were connected to Mikhail because we were running a fundraiser here, and Mikhail was free and said, I can come. And we're like, you should come. And then we talked to PETA because PETA was doing the Rainbow Riots, and Kamoga was part of that. And PETA said, oh, you're bringing Kamoga to Hong Kong. I'm free in those dates. I'm like, okay. So instead of me going, I don't have a budget, we don't have people to talk to, I was like, you know what? This just has to happen, man. Like, we got to do this. The universe is calling on us to do this. In my hippie brain, I was taking the cue, and we were lucky with Theresa. Theresa was in Singapore. She's been a mate for a while and a Planet Ally Global Ambassador. And we've done some work with her about being an ally to the disability community and with our own LGBTI community, realizing that as well. So the stars were just aligning, and it was just a domino effect of all these amazing activists. And we reached out to the United Nations Development Program and said, this is happening. They're like, okay, well, we'll bring Ryan over from the ASEAN Soji Caucus. And so boom, 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 away this thing happened, and then a few more activists jumped on board. So what we're doing this 2018 is regrouping, recapping, and saying, whoa, look at the potential of that. That's a Pandora's box that we've opened. Now we need to find a tangible way to make it sustainable. We want to bring more partners on. We've already had partners' interests, and we're going to set one up in Australia in the future, which I think is then looking at the intersectional issues that each country faces. It's not an insert new name here, but the idea of bringing together multifaceted human rights communities to talk about allyship. And for us, it's taking it from the LGBTI view and then looking inward and outward. But it could be any community, then bringing in a queer space for that. But I'm really proud that what we've done is awakening the allyship journey of our human rights defenders that came from all around the world, thinking more now about asylum seekers, thinking about human trafficking especially, thinking about migrant workers, which not all countries that were represented have that, but they have Indigenous issues. They have their own cultural, civil political issues. And so the model is born, and now we make it sustainable, and we build to ensure that we're really not a token event, not a white saviour event, that we are creating value for everyone that's attending and is part of it. Although I'm a South Aussie, my wife was born here. I've lived here for 14 years. It really is home. And I think not just as an LGBTI activist, but you realise that we see a lot with regard to migrant worker exploitation. We know that human trafficking is a huge issue in Hong Kong. A lot of these issues are hidden. And so perhaps what I'm always trying to do is challenge myself as an ally, not just in our LGBTI community, but how do I be the best ally to our migrant worker community? How do I be the best ally to asylum and refugee communities? But as I said before, a lot of that just hit me in the face when I was trying to do something for Camoga and found a Ugandan asylum seeker attending our event. You know, that blew my mind, and it was such an important takeaway for you never know who's going to be in the room, and you need to make sure you don't do harm and that you create opportunities and just never narrow your view, especially in a place like Hong Kong, because you could have anybody that's with you, that's in this community. But that also creates opportunities for us to work together, to build our allyship together, and to collaborate.
And something for our listeners is to really understand that anyone can be an ally. You don't have to belong to any of these particular groups.
Yeah.
You know, I identify as straight, but certainly I feel a great allyship with so many different communities, and being part of this festival and putting out these podcasts and meeting all these incredible people has only strengthened that and opened my mind. And I guess that's what we're hoping for everyone out there. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from or what your background is or how you identify.
Yeah.
Everybody can be an ally and support any human rights.
Yeah, and environmental rights and just any, civil, political, human right that needs championed, that you're passionate about. Many of your listeners will be allies without even realising. The definition of ally, I'm deliberately expanding that because a lot of people think that ally means a straight ally, a non-LGBT ally. But in all honesty, I see a gap in allyship within our community, and that needs to delicately be challenged. And we don't have it all together, and so we need to constantly our lesbian and gay community need to get better about being a trans ally. And if you go back to Stonewall, there's huge history and damage that's been done by the cis, gay, lesbian community to our trans community, that we're at the forefront of fighting for things. When you look at marriage equality, that is not necessarily a transgender, non-binary sole issue. There's harm that's been done to so many of our communities, the intersex community. You have hospitals being awarded for being rainbow family friendly at one end, on the other end are doing harm to, intersex babies. And so there's a massive conversation for our community, but then we've got to make sure that those outside of that community feel part of it, and also think about all of our issues just in society that we can champion.
I think this point that you've just made is so interesting, and something that many of the people, just your regular person on the street that's not as well versed in all of these issues, really understands. I had no idea about the negative attitude towards trans people with the Stonewall thing until I watched a documentary on Netflix, and then I became so much more aware. I just didn't know. So there's really so much for us to learn, and I think you've just touched on so many issues that we really could educate ourselves about by watching documentaries, doing research, getting involved.
The history, I think, so glad you saw that as about Marsha P. Johnson. I really encourage you guys to check that out, and especially if you are...
Do you remember what it's called?
Let's go back. I'm going to... Hang on.
Hang on, let's
Google
take a break.
Let's
Google, so we can recommend it. Because that was an incredible documentary that really opened my eyes to what you're saying about the varying attitudes within a community that should be aligned.
That's right. And I mean, look, we're from Adelaide. There used to be a Beans bar. As a baby lesbian, I would go to this Beans bar, and I think the very first thing that I saw that resonated to me about this is I saw two gay men kissing, and my reaction as a 19-year-old was, oh, that's so cute. Some older lesbians walked past and went, oh my God, that's disgusting. And I'm like, how can you say that's disgusting? Like, that sits with me now and probably has always, and maybe that's been a good catalyst to me trying to be the best ally I can be. But I also humbly was asked to be on the Asia Pacific Transgender Network board last year, and I accepted with in a heartbeat, because that makes me a better ally. And we can't be creating progress in any of our communities without allies that don't self-identify in that community. We need our straight allies to champion LGBTI. We need everybody to champion each other, whether it's environments or human rights. We really underestimate the role that we can play. Yeah, it's called The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. But what I want to say to you is, when there was this movie that was produced about Stonewall, what happened is they erased the trans role in that movie. And so that just adds and re-traumatizes people that are like, are we doing this again now? Hollywood's doing it to us? Like, just completely erasing the role. And so that, it's very fractious. It's very raw. The intersex community are doing amazing work to become visible and educate not just the medical fraternity and our entire global community, but they've got to start from our lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans community. The bisex community are starting to emerge and saying, hey, you guys have done a disservice to us. So Planet Ally is definitely born out of wanting to create conversations and opportunities to bridge build and take everyone on our allyship journey. Me at the front of that line.
Congratulations on all that you've achieved. It was amazing. I was so proud to be a part of it. And we've got a podcast with Kamoga. We've got one with Matt Friedman on human trafficking. Yeah. We've got one with Mikhail on LGBTQ network in Russia. And now this one with Petter and Theresa and you is really the final one for this year. But I'm really looking forward to doing more and having more interviews next year. So what are the dates for the Human Dignity Festival next year?
Well, thanks to our phenomenal partners, Meta, they unanimously had their meeting and have agreed to host us again, which I'm thrilled about. It's such a cool space, and we really made it an intimate, great space. So November 18th to 19th, which is the Saturday, Sunday, deliberately to coincide with the International Day for Tolerance, which is the Friday, November 16th. So that's when we'll have our press conference. And then we are now... already global activists are reaching out to us going, hey, we want in on this. And we're going to be really careful to curate that, because the dynamic of who we bring in is also the magic of it. Having 10 global LGBTI activists on the MTR coming over, our phenomenal partner in Eaton Hotel. Like, honestly, I'm humbled by the resonance of this, and especially because it was done on a whim. Now we're doing it deliberately, and now we add even more partners. More of the global rights, human rights organisations want to get on board. We want to find a way to make it accessible for those that are not in Hong Kong. But this is going to be one of Hong Kong's, what I hope, events that people know about when they think about human rights. It's going to live in Hong Kong. Hopefully it will live in Meta, deliberately small, less than 100 people, carefully curated. We want to find a way for everyone to be involved, but the small and mighty aspect is also what makes this powerful.
Totally agree with you. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience, and it really moved me and made me want to make a difference in the world. And I hope that by people listening and becoming more aware, that will make a little bit of headway in helping people get on board and doing something for human rights. The other thing I wanted to mention is it's really amazing that we're in Hong Kong and how people are so supportive and so willing to donate and get on board and give their spaces and stuff. And that's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I have said to so many people around the world when I'm speaking at different events and running different events, there is nowhere like Hong Kong. We ran events in 5 different countries last year, and over 30 different country activists. But without a doubt, what we do in Hong Kong works the most efficiently because we have an amazing active ally community. We have corporate privilege. We have our own privilege to leverage. I always talk about my privilege because it is now what I'm using as a gift. I used to feel guilty about my white privilege, but now what I realize is I use it to get others a voice at the table. And Hong Kong, despite the government situation, despite the political situation, what the business community are able to offer and support, and our NGO partners and the way that they work, we can make it work despite that. And hopefully we'll wait for them to catch up.
Bess, thank you so much for talking to me and introducing this podcast and talking about the Human Dignity Festival. I really appreciate it, and I'm so looking forward to the next one.
Yes, please come on the journey, because your impact and sending the stories out has just been instrumental to making sure this is not just about Hong Kong, and it's about all of our allyship journeys. And we really welcome and want people to share ideas about what they think would be, a good topic to cover. And we want to make this a collaborative process. So please get in touch. I'd love to meet you offline.
So how can people get in touch with you, Bess, if they want to chip in?
Okay, well, I guess the easiest way is to email me, but that's not tweet me.
Definitely tweet her. She's active on Twitter.
Bess _Hepworth on Twitter, or, stalk me on Facebook. But also Planet Ally app is our Twitter. Send me a direct message or just send me a tweet openly, or email bess@planetally.org. But really, this is a humble work in progress, and it takes a village to do it justice.
Well, Bess, congratulations, and thanks for all your work. You're making such a big difference to so many people all around the world. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm glad my wife forgives me.
Your wife is awesome.
She is a rock star.
She is. I know, you're a champion. You're an absolute champion and a role model, and one of the most amazing women I've ever met, and I'm proud to know you. Thank you so much.
Back at you, mate. And I'm just so proud and thrilled to see the success that you're having with the podcast, and you're a natural. So keep telling the stories, and not just about us, but thank you for the coverage you've given to our community.
And there'll be more to come.
Rainbow Riots is a politically and religiously independent non-profit organisation advocating for the human rights of LGBTQ people globally, using arts and culture as their tools. The organisation Rainbow Riots is registered in both Sweden and Uganda. This association is run by founder and managing director Petter Wallenberg, a Swedish artist, musician, author and human rights activist. I was lucky enough to be able to interview Petter at the Human Dignity Festival. Here's that interview. Today I'm here with Petter from Rainbow Riots. Hi Petter, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
So can you tell me a little bit about Rainbow Riots and how it originated?
Rainbow Riots is an organization that I am the founding director of, and it originated through an album that we've just released, which I produced and composed. And it features queer voices from some of the world's most anti-gay places, like Uganda, Malawi, Jamaica, and South Africa. I am a kind of a musician and an artist and a filmmaker. So it was an idea that I had, which started out as a music project. And along the way, going to these places, meeting people and experiencing both horrific things and amazing bonding with my collaborators, Rainbow Riots has grown into something much bigger than just an album. So it's now its own organization.
And do you consider yourself musicians and activists?
Yeah, a kind of unique mix of the two. The whole thing started as a music project, but now it is a creative activist project. How
do you source all of your queer musicians from all over the world? How did you find them?
Well, there's a lot of detective work and a lot of legwork. You really have to get out there and meet people and get yourself out there to, these actual places. So at the time when I had the idea to do this album, Uganda was very much in the news because of the situation there. So I thought, well, I've got to go to Uganda. I went out there and I kind of took myself to sometimes quite dangerous places, and I met the people and took it from there. It was quite an organic process.
That's so admirable that you actually, you didn't use social media or the internet to find them. You actually went by foot and, you got out into the trenches and found them. So that's really amazing. That must have been such a cool experience.
Yeah, and I think, like these days, we have the benefit of communicating via social media, but nothing beats, the real experience of actually going somewhere and meeting people and experiencing what they experience. And I think so much of activism today is just words and it's just academic terms, whereas this is real, this is flesh and blood. And I think that's the difference with a lot of issues when it just becomes words. And when it's only on social media, as you say, it is words and it's just text. Whereas everyone in Rainbow Riot, we've actually sat down and made the music together. We've had this kind of organic process, which has been amazing.
That's amazing. And where's Rainbow Riots based?
Rainbow Riots is registered in Sweden and in Uganda.
And where are you from?
I'm from Sweden.
And how did you end up here at the Human Rights Festival in Hong Kong?
I was invited by one of the founders, by Bess, who had followed my work with Rainbow Riots. And yeah, she sort of said, come along, and here I am.
And how long's Rainbow Riots been running?
It's been 2.5 years since 2.5 years since I sort of got the idea to start making the album. And as an organization for a little over a year. So the album came out in June and, so it's all quite new.
How do you identify as a part of the LGBTQ community?
Well, to me, it's not that important with pronouns and identification because I just think at the end of the day, it's not really up to us because we're always going to be defined by somebody else. But, I'm a gay male, but I don't let that define my inner identity because I just kind of think, these days it's all just words, all of it. And I just think I didn't decide what I was going to be identified as. Somebody else did when I was a child. They called me a faggot before I even knew what a faggot was. So for me, it's like, it's just biology and technicality. I'm a man who has sex with men and it's like, call it what you want. I don't really put a lot of identity into that as such. However, I do put a lot of identity into what we create as cultural identities to survive, So to me, I think there's a strong, strong, strong bond between queer people all over the world. So for me, even though, of course, I'm not, from Uganda, when I arrived in Uganda, I felt like I knew everyone already because there's a shared experience in being different and a specific experience in being LGBT that is very unique. So I think even here in Hong Kong, like going to a gay bar here, I could probably immediately sort of look at them and kind of go, yeah, I know that type. Yeah, I know what he's like, in a way that, I think we share that bond, which to me, that's interesting. Then however you individually choose to identify, I don't think, it's that important, really. So
it's not really about labels, but it's more about a shared experience or a connection.
Well, it's a shared experience of outsidership. And it's a very specific outsidership because as an LGBT person, you're born alone. Other minority groups are born with parents who are of the minority group, whereas we're born alone. So I think that creates who we are more than anything. And of course, there's a sort of shared thing that transcends every culture. Like, the stereotypes of gay males or lesbians or trans, a lot of times it's kind of frowned upon with stereotypes, but sometimes it's also quite a sort of nice bond because you sort of see stereotypes and you go, yeah, I recognize that. And, I don't think there's a problem. People have a lot of issues with stereotypes and prejudice and stuff, but there's also truth to them. And I think that there's only a problem in a stereotype if it's a negative thing. And for me, when I see traits that are sort of like typical gay male traits, I don't have a problem with having those traits or any other of my friends having them because I don't have a problem with being gay. So I think a lot of what we read into it stems from how we're treated by the outside world, not so much about how we are as our own entity.
That makes a whole lot of sense. And, I'd never considered before about being born alone, whereas if you're from another minority group, you're born into a family of the same minority. So that's a really moving statement for me that has really given me pause for thought. So thank you for saying that. But I'd really like to know, what was it like growing up gay in Sweden? Because I've never been there. I don't know what the culture's particularly like. So can you give me some insight into what that was like?
Well, Sweden's a very progressive country, and I would say that the homophobia in Sweden is and historically has been on a lower level than many other places. However, it's not always been perfect, and, it's progressive now, but it wasn't really when I grew up. And, I'm turning 40 in a few weeks. So I come from a time when, when I was born, homosexuality was classified as a mental illness, which it was in a lot of places. And when I came into my teens, it was during the AIDS crisis, and there was a lot of ugly homophobia that reared its ugly head then. And I think that, doing the Rainbow Riots project, for me, it's a very personal project as well, because I'm in countries like Uganda and places where I really recognize that struggle. When I speak to straight people sometimes, and they kind of talk about, oh, you're going to Africa, to them, it's like this sort of really alien thing. Whereas to me, it's like, no, because the struggle there is the same personal journey that I've had in my life, albeit, that they're in a different stage of it right now. But I know exactly what this struggle is. And I think that's the difference. When a straight person works with refugees or goes to Africa, they deal with something that's totally different from them. Whereas I'm working with my brothers and sisters down there. We're dealing with exactly the core of who we are, which is, the growing up alone, or sort of being born alone into a society as LGBT people, and having to fight for our identity and shape our identity. And in many ways, we're so similar, which is is uncanny at times, that like I can meet a young gay man or a young trans person who lives in the outskirts of Kampala, and I could be like, yeah, I recognize myself as a teenager, And I think that's a really unique and beautiful thing about being LGBT. And a lot of times we don't get to say that there's something in our experience that is beautiful. There's always just focus on the struggle. And I think for this project, it's really been about sort of also saying, hey, we're beautiful, we're phenomenal, let's celebrate that.
And could you share a story of how Rainbow Riots has perhaps moved or helped or assisted some young gay person somewhere? Do you have any sort of anecdotal evidence of the work that you do being successful?
Last year when we were in Kampala was it was a very eventful time. We were working on the Rainbow Riots album, and we were working on the performances, and we were meant to perform at Uganda Pride. However, the police stormed in and held us all hostage. So we were all held at gunpoint by 30 armed policemen, and some of the members of our group were arrested and assaulted, and everyone in the venue were held for 2 hours.
Oh my gosh, were you afraid for your life?
Well, when you're in a situation like that, you just don't know what's going to happen, and you it's just the here and the now. You don't really think, oh, what's going to happen? Am I going to live? Am I going to die? But of course, there's that uncertainty. And when there's a huge group of you and everyone's uncertain, it felt like being on the Titanic or in Auschwitz or some kind of situation where you have no control of your own destiny. And it also sort of obviously gave me a complete insight into the realities of being LGBT today in Uganda. Coming away from that experience, it cemented us as a group, because when you've shared a real moment of despair, and you've kind of shared this kind of uncertainty of whether you're going to live or you're going to die, you come away and you can go two ways. You can either completely split up and escape from the whole issue, or you grow stronger and you really sort of decide to keep fighting. And that's what we did. And I would say that was the birth of Rainbow Riots as an organization, that moment there.
As an activist organization, yeah?
Yeah, as not just a music project. It there and then it grew into something bigger. And of course, helping the young people in the group that I work with in that situation afterwards was very touching, because I would say the aftermath of that police raid was extremely, of course, we were all very traumatized. And so to sort of boost the morale, we organized a sort of little secret pride party in Kampala, and all our dancers and performers, and, they were, we scraped together so we could give everyone an allowance, a little kind of, token fee for their work. And I think it was something like $250 each. And one of our young trans performers got the money and started crying, tears of joy, and said, I'm going to do something that I've always dreamt of. And she was like, thanks to Rainbow Riots, it's enabled me to do something that I've always dreamt of. And I said, what's that? She said, I'm going to buy a bed. And that's when it really puts into perspective where you're like, these are sort of like basic necessities of life, you know, that are... That
we take for granted.
That we take for granted. And, you know, it gives you a lot of perspective, and it makes you really humble. And it also sort of makes you understand what the concrete discrimination is, you know, in a place that's already poor and already a tough place. To be LGBT is to be at the margin of that. And that, I would say that is like one of those two moments have been one of the sort of big key moments for me, to see that you're making a difference. And of course, that was a monetary difference, but there's been so many other differences made in terms of how we see the people we work with grow, and how we see them develop, and how we see this platform that we're offering and that we're building together to actually have an effect on them, and to make them stronger, and to sort of, you watch them grow with it. And that's amazing. It
sounds so rewarding. And I think you must be so proud of the work that you're doing and the difference that you're making in so many people's lives. It's awesome.
It is extremely rewarding. And because the heart of it is creativity, it's rewarding in a very special way, because creativity is a sort of universal language, and you connect with each other in a very emotional way, you know, like with all the group that I'm working with everyone who I'm working with, we're making songs together. We're coming up with dance routines. You know, we're thinking of styling and makeup. You know, there's a lot of fun elements together where it becomes a sort of really emotionally fun process.
Creativity is so good for the soul.
It really is.
Yeah.
And also when you're dealing with really emotional issues in a creative way, it just heightens everything.
Petter, what advice would you give to any young person who is struggling with their gender or sexuality and they are thinking about what the next steps are? What would you say to them?
I would say, don't take everything so seriously. That is one of the kind of things that as you get older, I think when you're young, everything is such a burden, and it doesn't really matter whether you're in Kampala, Hong Kong or Stockholm. When you're a young person struggling with your identity, you take life very seriously. And as you get older, you take life a bit less seriously. Of course, we take the real issues seriously, injustice. But I would say,
we don't sweat the small stuff so much.
Exactly. And I would say, try and get a bit of perspective on it and try and enjoy it. Like, as I said earlier, being LGBT isn't a curse. It's a beautiful thing. If the world around you treats it like a curse, that's their problem, not yours.
Petter, that's a beautiful way to finish our interview. Thank you so much for speaking to me today. It's inspirational. So, Petter, can you just tell me how our listener can get in touch with you or can find you and Rainbow Riots?
If you want to check out Rainbow Riots, you can look it up on iTunes, on Spotify. Rainbow Riots, the whole album is there, and our singles, Equal Rights, Freedom, Stand Up for Your Rights, they're all there. And also on YouTube, there's music videos and a little documentary about Rainbow Riots, the album. So just start Googling and look it up.
Great. I'm going to get Googling straight away. So it's been great to meet you, Petter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Theresa Goh is a Singaporean-born Paralympic swimmer and medalist. She's won bronze medals for the 100-metre breaststroke in the 2016 Summer Paralympics, and she holds the world record for the 50 metres and 200 metres breaststroke events. Theresa is a member of the LGBTQ community, and she was at the Human Dignity Festival, and we got a chance to have a quick chat in between sessions. Here's my interview with Theresa. So today I'm here with Theresa at the Human Dignity Festival. Hi, Theresa.
Hiya.
How are you?
Good.
What brings you here to the festival today?
I was invited by Bess. I met her last year at Out Leadership. I recently came out publicly in Singapore. And in Singapore, it's still illegal for gay men to have sex. And for lesbians, they just probably don't think that lesbian sex exists.
It just doesn't happen.
It's like, how?
You live in Singapore?
Yes. So I'm based in Singapore. I live there. I was born there. I've never been really in the closet, but I also never really talked about it publicly because I never felt the need to. until recently, I've become more and more aware of the hate surrounding LGBTQ people in the world. And for me, as someone with quite a bit of privilege, and I'm very safe at home, my family is supportive, my friends are supportive, I would feel a lot of guilt not doing anything. So I felt like after Rio, when I got a lot more publicity, I felt the need to use that kind of newfound status to do something about it. And so I started talking about it in the papers, corporate talks, really wherever I can, I try and put it in. Like little things like making sure I acknowledge I identify as queer in my Instagram, where I know a lot of young kids, young LGBTQ people see my stuff. I definitely don't want to hide anything. I don't feel like I don't want them to feel like I have to hide anything, you know. So taking little steps here and there, trying my best to learn as much as I can how to be a good human being, a good ally, just trying to make the world better. Yeah.
What were you doing in Rio, and what was the rise to fame that happened for you in Rio?
I was swimming. I've been swimming for 18 years, so Rio was my 4th Paralympics. It was my first medal.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing. What did you win the medal in?
I got a bronze in 100 breaststroke SB4.
Oh, fantastic. So when did you start swimming?
When I was 12, 18 years ago, so I'm 30.
You young thing.
I don't feel young.
Yep, you are. Okay, so you went to Rio and you won your first medal in the Paralympics, and then did that really give you a platform for actually becoming a LGBTQ activist?
Yes. I mean, I've always been the same person I am, but I think, like recently, some people have been saying that I'm the first openly gay, openly queer athlete in Singapore. I don't think that's true. It's just that people are willing to talk to me, you know? So there are a lot of openly queer LGBTQ athletes in Singapore, just that they don't get the exposure, and I think that's quite harmful, you know. I think it's all quite different factors and quite intersectional, I think. When people care more about the medals, then only people who get the medals get the publicity, right? And then a lot of people get left behind. And then you kind of promote that very harmful view that only medals or only medal winners are important. So I definitely try not let people stereotype like that kind of view. But it's hard because I did get a medal.
But that's a good thing, because now you're making a difference for Paralympians and for LGBTQ people. So that's awesome.
I'm trying, because I on one hand, I realize people are willing to talk to me more because I got a medal. On the other hand, I really hate that happened, you know.
Why?
I don't like that they saw my value only once I got a medal, you know. I've always been this person. How come you didn't want to talk to me before, you know? So that's the kind of view that I take on that. But I still have to talk to people because I realize that they see the medal as a value, of some measure of value of my person, you know? So, yeah, I mean, not just talking about LGBT rights, I also try and talk about disability rights because it affects me directly. And like, if you try and find a queer disabled athlete in Singapore, it's quite hard to find.
Do you get discriminated against because of the way you identify in the LGBT community, or because of your disability?
Probably more so my disability, because it's more visible. Not that my queerness is not visible, but people are more able to deny my sexuality when you can't deny I'm disabled, you know? So one example is like, we can't assume people's identities based on their outlook or how they present, but I mean, it's quite obvious.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a contradiction there, right? But so there would be like Uber drivers or rideshare drivers that would feel the need to ask if I have a boyfriend. And I never quite really understand why, because what are you going to do with that information, you know? I feel like they use that as a way of finding out whether I'm queer, or like whether they think that disabled people can't have relationships or something, you know? So it's a lot of things that are quite complicated in that simple question. So usually I say I'm not interested, and I don't like to go into detail because I've always felt a little bit vulnerable, especially because I travel alone. If I do say that I'm gay, and then if they're homophobic, like, they are in control of my chair.
Yeah, so you've got to stay safe, don't you, and not put yourself at risk.
Yeah, exactly, which is something also I feel like a lot of people sometimes miss out when they tell people that they should come out, or be true to themselves, which is true, but you also gotta kind of figure out if they are safe, whether they want to come out, you know? Like, some people are so brave that they would come out no matter what. Some people just can't, and it's fine. You know, it's up to their own choices. And for me, yeah, I mean, I definitely don't feel safe sometimes when I'm alone with strangers, or especially men who are strangers. I haven't had a bad encounter, but that's not to say it won't happen. Yeah.
And I guess for all of us, for different reasons, we need to be wary and be aware, don't we? Theresa, thank you so much for talking to me today.
I would love that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So today I'm here with Theresa at the Human Dignity Festival. Hi, Theresa.
Hiya.
How are you?
Good.
What brings you here to the festival today?
I was invited by Bess. I met her last year at Out Leadership. I recently came out publicly in Singapore. And in Singapore, it's still illegal for gay men to have sex. And for lesbians, they just probably don't think that lesbian sex exists.
It just doesn't happen.
It's like, wow.
You live in Singapore?
Yes. So I'm based in Singapore. I live there. I was born there. I've never been really in the closet, but I also never really talked about it publicly because I never felt the need to. Until recently, I've become more and more aware of the hate surrounding LGBTQ people in the world. And for me, as someone with quite a bit of privilege, and I'm very safe at home, my family is supportive, my friends are supportive, I would feel a lot of guilt not doing anything. So I felt like after Rio, when I got a lot more publicity, I felt the need to use that kind of newfound status to do something about it. And so I started talking about it in the papers, corporate talks, really wherever I can, I try and put it in. Like little things like making sure I acknowledge, I identify as queer in my Instagram, where I know a lot of young kids, young LGBTQ people see my stuff. I definitely don't want to hide anything. I don't feel like, I don't want them to feel like I have to hide anything, you know? So taking little steps here and there, trying my best to learn as much as I can how to be a good human being, a good ally, just trying to make the world better, yeah.
What were you doing in Rio, and what was the rise to fame that happened for you in Rio?
I was swimming. I've been swimming for 18 years, so Rio was my 4th Paralympics. It was my first medal.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing. What did you win the medal in?
I got a bronze in 100 breaststroke SB4.
Oh, fantastic. So when did you start swimming?
When I was 12, 18 years ago, so I'm 30.
You young thing.
I don't feel young.
Yep, you are. Okay, so you went to Rio and you won your first medal in the Paralympics, and then did that really give you a platform for actually becoming a LGBTQ activist?
Yes. I mean, I've always been the same person I am, but I think, like recently, some people have been saying that I'm the first openly gay, openly queer athlete in Singapore. I don't think that's true. It's just that people are willing to talk to me, you know? So there are a lot of openly queer LGBTQ athletes in Singapore, just that they don't get the exposure, and I think that's quite harmful, you know. I think it's all quite different factors and quite intersectional, I think. When people care more about the medals, then only people who get the medals get the publicity, right? And then a lot of people get left behind. And then you kind of promote that very harmful view that only medals or only medal winners are important. So I definitely try not let people stereotype like that kind of view. But it's hard because I did get a medal.
But that's a good thing because now you're making a difference for Paralympians and for LGBTQ people. So that's awesome.
I'm trying because I on one hand, I realize people are willing to talk to me more because I got a medal. On the other hand, I really hate that happened, you know.
Why?
I don't like that they saw my value only once I got a medal, you know. I've always been this person. How come you didn't want to talk to me before, you know? So that's the kind of view that I take on that. But I still have to talk to people because I realize that they see the medal as a value, of some measure of value of my person, you know? So, yeah, I mean, not just talking about LGBT rights, I also try and talk about disability rights because it affects me directly. And like, if you try and find a queer disabled athlete in Singapore, it's quite hard to find.
Do you get discriminated against because of the way you identify in the LGBT community or because of your disability?
Probably more so my disability because it's more visible. Not that my queerness is not visible, but people are more able to deny my sexuality when you can't deny I'm disabled, you know? So one example is like, we can't assume people's identities based on their outlook or how they present, but I mean, it's quite obvious.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a contradiction there, right? But so there would be like Uber drivers or rideshare drivers that would feel the need to ask if I have a boyfriend. And I never quite really understand why, because what are you going to do with that information, you know? I feel like they use that as a way of finding out whether I'm queer or like whether they think that disabled people can't have relationships or something, you know? So it's a lot of things that are quite complicated in that simple question. So usually I say I'm not interested and I don't like to go into detail because I always felt a little bit vulnerable, especially because I travel alone. If I do say that I'm gay and then if they're homophobic, like they are in control of my chair.
Yeah, so you've got to stay safe, don't you, and not put yourself at risk.
Yeah, exactly, which is something also I feel like a lot of people sometimes miss out when they tell people that they should come out or be true to themselves, which is true, but you also got to kind of figure out if they are safe, whether they want to come out, you know? Like some people are so brave that they would come out no matter what. Some people just can't, and it's fine, you know? It's up to their own choices. And for me, yeah, I mean, I definitely don't feel safe sometimes when I'm alone with strangers or especially men who are strangers. I haven't had a bad encounter, but that's not to say it won't happen. Yeah.
And I guess for all of us, for different reasons, we need to be wary and be aware, don't we? Theresa, thank you so much for talking to me today.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.